Hello guys, this is your friend Dark Fox Sage. And we are back with our new fanfic, which is what if Kurama gave Naruto an ancient bloodline and trained him for chunin exams? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then subscribe to the channel, it motivates me to upload more fanfics like these for you all. And check the description, there are many things for you guys. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto just kept running from Ebisu, not even daring to turn around and look. In his mind, hundreds of thoughts were racing through his head. One was that Kakashi didn't want to train him but rather train Sasuke, just because he was going up against last year Rookie of the Year. I can't believe that Kakashi-sensei would just abandon me. It's like everyone only cares about the tem. But the most important thought in his mind was the blood oath he made for Hinata when she lost her match against Neji. He didn't know why he did that. It was if watching Hinata being hurt and degraded made him so mad. He also couldn't help but notice that she would call him Naruto-kun a lot, unlike the names he got from the rest of the villagers. Now that he thought about it, it made him feel warm inside whenever she said his name or talked to him. Naruto was no expert at looking at people's emotions, but could it be that Hinata actually liked him, perhaps loved him? Naruto had never thought that there was a person in all of Konoha who saw him like that. He soon found himself deep in one of the forest of Konoha all alone. He had been so distracted that he hadn't noticed where he was going. Sighing in defeat, Naruto sat down and continued on thinking about everything. However, soon he fell asleep and sunk deep into his subconscious. Naruto's mindscape. Naruto fluttered his eyes open before he sat up and rubbed them. After that was done, he looked around to see he was in some kind of sewer. However, it did not have the smell of a sewer really, and he saw no signs of life either. I could have sworn I was in a forest. Now where am I now? Naruto muttered to himself as he began walking to find a way out. It seemed like he had been walking forever, turning down various halls and cutting corners, and he was getting annoyed. He stopped, however, when he felt a wave of power. The blonde turned around and walked down another hall and kept moving straight. When he arrived, his eyes widened when he saw a giant cage that was being held together by a single piece of paper. Walking forward, he stopped and tried to look within the cage but couldn't see anything past the bars, that is, until a pair of large glowing blood-red eyes with black slits and a large mouth formed into a grin that showed its large sharp teeth appeared. Naruto stared at the eyes till a voice spoke, and it wasn't Naruto's. "Hello there, human." Naruto's eyes widened as the voice was deep and intimidating. He wanted to run away but he was frozen to the spot. "Are why you the Kyuubi?" Naruto asked. The figure laughed and gave a nod. "Yes, I am, puny human. You must be my container, correct?" Kyuubi asked. Naruto gave a quick nod. "Well, do you mind pulling off that tag and letting me out?" Kyuubi asked nicely. Naruto was going to nod till he realized what the fox said and glared. "Like hell I'm not. I'm not letting you out, Dadbao," Naruto declared, not noticing Kyuubi's eye twitch at the verbal tick. Sighing, Kyuubi spoke. "Worth a shot. Anyway, what do you want, Kit?" Kyuubi wondered. Naruto blinked in confusion since that wasn't the response he expected. But he wasn't complaining. That response was much better than the one he thought he was going to receive. "Well, I actually don't know how I got here. Where am I anyway?" Naruto wondered. The Kyuubi gave a shrug. "We're here in your mind. Pretty dull if you ask me," Kyuubi grumbled. Naruto looked around and couldn't help but agree. "Okay, so how did I get here? Last thing I remember was falling asleep in a forest," Naruto muttered. Kyuubi nodded before speaking. "The reason that you are here, well, let's just say that someone wants to have a chat with you, but right now it's just you and me," the Kyuubi said in a bored tone. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the fox. "Hey, how come you aren't all angry and boasting at me like I thought you would? Shouldn't you be yelling at me about how you are the great Kyuubi and I am nothing but a sack of flesh and bones and should bow down to your power?" Naruto asked. "Yeah, but that's too much work and unnecessary. And I can't really live up to that title if I have been sealed 3 times in the past 50 years or so. Seriously, I don't even have the chance to stretch my legs anymore. Not to mention I haven't taken a shower in forever. Kyuubi ranted. Naruto couldn't help but sweat drop at the giant fox's behavior. The Kyuubi was big for sure, but it didn't seem all terrifying and dangerous as the villagers made it sound to be. He was pretty friendly more or less, and in fact it almost sounded like a regular human, almost. So you said someone wanted to see me? Naruto asked curiously. The Kyuubi nodded and tilted his head to the right, revealing a door, which said, "The paths," on it. That paths? What's that? Naruto asked the fox. The Kyuubi smirked. Why don't you open it and find out? All I know is that door appeared when your chakra was messed up by that creepy ninja in the Forest of Death. Naruto pondered a moment and suddenly remembered about that creepy Kunoichi slammed her hand against the seal, making him angry that he didn't mention it to Kakashi. But seeing how he couldn't really figure out how to get out of here, he thought what the heck and walked towards the door. Moving slowly he opened it before the door opened fully on its own and he was soon sucked in. The Kyuubi, who was watching, looked at the door and could have sworn he saw some kind of eye in there, a familiar one too. Back with Naruto, the said boy was now in a room of complete darkness. Where am I? He asked himself. We have been waiting, a voice said, startling Naruto. Who are you? Naruto asked nervously. We are you, the voice responded. Me. Yes, and you have unlocked what has been deep inside of you. Deep inside of me? Naruto asked confused. What does that mean? Who are you? We are you and we shall slowly become one, but first you must master us. Master you. There are 6 paths and one outside of us. Deva, Asura, human, animal, Preta, Naraka, and finally outer. Those are the 7 paths, the true you. But for now we shall leave. This is something you must learn on your own, in order for you to become the next sage. The voice said before disappearing. Before Naruto could ask anything else, his mind was suddenly bombarded with information, knowledge long lost. It was so overwhelming for him to contain. Naruto screamed in agony as he tried to stop it, and then he blacked out again. The Kyuubi watched as the boy was shot out of the room and skidded on the ground and the door closed and disappeared. He watched as the boy got up, and when he looked back at him, the Kyuubi's eyes widened. The boy's eyes were no longer the warm blue they once were. Now they were fully purple with metallic silver along with 6 rings converging on a small dot-like pupil. The Rinnegan, the Kyuubi thought. As if hearing the fox, Naruto squinted his eyes before murmuring, Kurama, causing the fox's eyes to widen. Your name is Kurama, right? He said in a deeper voice that sounded full of wisdom. The Kyuubi's eyes narrowed. How do you know my name, boy? He asked with a growl. Naruto rubbed his head, the information still going into his mind. I don't know. I heard voices inside my head, something about becoming the next sage. He said. The Kyuubi was thinking hard about what the boy was saying. Could he be father's descendant or reincarnation? His natural chakra feels more smooth, controlled and larger than before. But why would his dojutsu appear now instead on the day he was born? Makes no sense unless. A loud grunt from Naruto broke the Kyuubi's train of thought. What the hell are these images and what's a jubi? He mumbled to himself. Kyuubi decided that he had no choice but to explain things. Yo kid, listen up. The eyes you have belong to the Raikudo Sennin, and if my guess is correct you must be his reincarnation, so you're probably receiving your past life memories. The Kyuubi said. For a moment Naruto ignored the pain in his head and looked up at the fox. Raikudo Sennin, who's that? Naruto asked confused. The Raikudo Sennin, or sage of the 6 paths, was the most powerful human in existence. His powers and knowledge helped create ninjutsu, basically becoming the founder of the shinobi world and a god in many people's eyes. It's because of him why clans, ninjas and hidden villages are even here now. The Kyuubi said proudly. Naruto titled his head to the side at the way the fox spoke of the sage. It almost sounded like he admired him. Anyway, what can you tell me about these eyes? The the Rinnegan. It's called the Rinnegan, the Kyuubi said. And to be honest, I don't know that much. Hell, I doubt the sage knew much about his eyes too. All I can say is that they give the wielder great chakra control, a large amount to be exact, can sense barriers, control all five natures, and also allows the user to yin-yang jutsus. The most greatest of them was the sage's creation of all things jutsu. Naruto's eyes widened at that. Awesome. Are you saying that I can do all that stuff too? Then he frowned. Wait, if I had this dojutsu all along, then how come it didn't appear until now? First off, you may be able to use all five natures, but yin-yang release is difficult to use, so you might want to take your time with that. Also, whiles it's possible you can use the creation of all things, there is no guarantee that you can use it to the extent that the sage could, so I would focus on the five natures first. As to why it's activating now, well, my best guess is that the seal that the Yondaime used to put me inside of you must have somehow sealed off the Rinnegan. But when that weird girl from the forest used that five-prong seal on you, it must have activated your Rinnegan. Speaking of that seal, it seems like it has gone away, probably because your massive chakra managed to overpower it. The Kyuubi replied. Naruto nodded, taking all that in, which seemed to be easier for him now. Might be because of the Rinnegan. So wait, all these jutsus that I'm seeing in my head, I can do them all? Naruto asked, not wondering why he was asking the fox about this. But hey, he seemed like a nice person and obviously knew a lot about these eyes. And probably that he didn't want a weak container either. The Kyuubi thought for a moment before replying. Probably, but I would suggest you practice using them for the month. And just the lower rank ones like C through B rank before learning the powerful ones. The fox replied before yawning. Anyway, that's all I can say for now. You should probably wake up and get to training. Also say hi to that blue hair vixen of yours for me too. He said the last part with a chuckle before closing his eyes. Naruto got a tick mark about Hinata being his vixen before being pushed out of his mind and back into the real world. End of Mindscape. The next few weeks Naruto trained like hell to master his new eyes. As the Kyuubi said, he managed to master all five elemental techniques through C to B in a few A ranks by stealing scrolls from the library since they wouldn't let him in. He learned a few yin-yang techniques, but not so much that he could use them fully. With the help of his shadow clones, which Naruto discovered the true reason behind them, he managed to master two of the paths, Diva and Animal, though not to the full extent of them. Speaking of which, Naruto discovered that he could hide the Rinnegan by shifting it back to normal eyes, though instead of going back to blue his eyes would be purple. It wasn't that it took a drain of his chakra, it actually gave him a boost in that department, not that he needed it, he just didn't want anyone to freak out and make some stupid claim that the Kyuubi was possessing him or some shit like that. He even managed to create his own space-time ninjutsu similar to the Yondaime. He even learned Shinken, the fighting style of his mother's clan, the Uzumaki clan, the latter being quite a shock to him since he never realized that he had clan. Upon hearing that, he took an interest in the art that his clan were known for, Fuinjutsu. Naruto also decided that a change of clothing was called for. But he knew that none of the stores would welcome him, so he put on a double-layer henge and set to work in finding some new attire. He stayed in the forest the whole entire month so no one could find him either, and also so he could have some privacy. But on the third week Naruto decided to take a break and visit Hinata at the hospital. Of course that wasn't really easy since everyone there hated him. Oh come on, I just want to see Hinata-chan. What the hell is wrong with that? Naruto asked the receptionist as he held the flowers in his hand. They were bouquet of yellow and white flowers. Liar. I know that you want to spread your demon taint on the patients here. The receptionist screamed. Naruto was about to retort when a familiar voice from behind spoke. Naruto. Said boy turned around and saw Kurenai Yuhi standing before him. Naruto smiled, knowing she could help him see Hinata. Kurenai-sensei. Thank Kami you're here. He said relieved. Are you here to see Hinata-chan too? Kurenai didn't miss the add suffix and suppressed a smile. Yes I am. And you? She asked. Naruto nodded and held up the flowers. Yeah I wanted to see if she was okay and give her these but this woman won't let me through. He said the last part with a grumble. Kurenai understood why Naruto wasn't allowed to see anyone and gave the receptionist a glare causing her to shrink behind the desk. I'm sorry but he cannot see Hinata-sama due to obvious reasons. She stammered while trying to compose herself. Kurenai darkened her glare. And what reasons would those be? She asked darkly towards the receptionist. Said woman gulped and pulled out a piece of paper with the Hyuga symbol on it. Hiyashi-sama ordered that no one besides himself, Hinata-sama's sister and personal bodyguard and her sensei can see her. That's why this boy cannot see her. Kurenai snatched the paper from the woman and read it carefully and sighed. I'm afraid she's right Naruto. She said with a bit of regret. Naruto frowned and looked down for a moment. Then his head perked up and he said, then if it's okay could you give these to Hinata-chan and tell her I hope she gets better? He asked. Kurenai smiled and took the flowers. I would be glad to Naruto. But I think you should focus on your training if you're going to beat Neji. Naruto nodded. Yep I've been training very hard. He said before bowing. Well thanks again Kurenai-sensei. I'll see you at the chunin exams. And with that he ran out the door. 2 weeks later. And so the final 2 weeks quickly came to an end. Naruto trained harder than before in the forest, however instead on creating new techniques he focused on the ones he already had and managed to create his own space-time ninjutsu called Mikado. The technique was so great and useful that even the Kyuubi had to admit it was impressive, even better than the Yondaime Hokage's Hiroshin. He also began practicing in Bojutsu and Kenjutsu and managed to purchase a good katana and an iron staff while he was hanged. Soon enough the day of the finals had arrived. The stadium was filled to capacity and the genin all began to file into the stadium. Up in the cage booth, the Hokage, along with his student Jiraiya and the Kazekage were looking down at the field. However only 7 of the 9 contestants were there, the ones who were missing being Sasuke Uchiha and Dosu Kinyuda. Soon the Hokage got up and spoke, "Thank you for coming. It is my honor to present to you the genin who will be competing for the title of Chunin." Sarutboy said from his sit beside the Kazekage, the leader of the Sand Village. As he sat down he looked down at Naruto and noticed that he was dressed differently now. Gone was the bright orange jumpsuit replaced with black pants, a black jacket with a hood with an orange swirl of the Uzumaki clan on the back. Strapped to his back was a katana and he also looked a bit taller too and there was a bit of red in his blonde spiky hair. But what's different is his aura. Hiruzen thought as he looked at his surrogate grandson. Jiraiya was also looking down at his godson, wondering where he was all this month. He had hoped to train him for the finals but could never find him. I will be the instructor. A Jonin said as he came up behind the genin. They all turned to look at him. He wore his headband backwards over his head, he wore the traditionally Jonin cloths, but he had a senbon in his mouth. My name is Genma, and I'll be your proctor for the 3rd part of the exam. He said. What happened to Hayate-san? Naruto asked curiously. Don't worry about it. Now everyone else besides the first 2 combatants should head up to the waiting area. Genma said. As the other contestants walked up to the waiting area, Naruto took this chance to scan the crowd. To his joy he saw Hinata sitting beside Kiba and Kurenai. She still looked a little weak after her battle with Neji but did her best not to show it. Naruto closed his eyes and took a deep breath activating his Rinnegan. He opened his eyes and they fell upon the one person that he had been waiting to fight for the longest time. You should give up now Uzumaki and save yourself the embarrassment. Neji said with a tone of superiority. You can't win. It is your fate to fall before me. He said. Naruto turned to Genma. Can we begin? He asked. Didn't you hear what I said? Neji yelled in anger at being ignored. Naruto turned his eyes toward Neji and even Genma flinched at the stone-cold stare he gave the Hyuga with his Rinnegan. Why don't you shut up? Naruto said in a deep voice as he flared a killing intent large enough to make a regular civilian pass out. The first match. Naruto Uzumaki vs Neji Hyuga, begin. Genma yelled. And in a blink of an eye, Naruto disappeared from his spot and reappeared right in front of Neji, shocking everyone. The Hyuga prodigy barely had any time to react before Naruto slammed a powerful punch right into his face, sending him flying backwards. Everyone was shocked, especially the Hokage, Sakura and all of Naruto's friends. That wasn't a shunshin that he just did, that was almost like the Hirishin. Hiruzen thought as he looked down at Naruto in shock and awe. Jiraiya and the Kazekage were also looking at Naruto with interest. But just as Neji was getting up, Naruto began forming hand signs so fast that not even the Sharingan could read them. Kaden. Grand Fireball Jutsu. And he blew out a large fireball straight towards Neji. However, Neji managed to use substitution with a log and managed to get behind Naruto. Now I got him, Neji thought to himself as he lunged his hand forward. But instead of hitting the blonde-hair boy, it went right through, shocking Neji. What? Before he could react, Naruto spun around and grabbed Neji's arm. Then he landed another punch into Neji's stomach, causing him to cough up more blood. Then Naruto headbutt him, causing the Hyuga to wince in pain. Then Naruto released Neji and said, Shinra Tensei. And suddenly Neji was sent flying backwards again, this time by an invisible force. Neji got up again and pulled out a kunai, but saw that Naruto had disappeared again. Now where did he go? Neji asked when he suddenly saw a shadow over him. Naruto was now diving towards him with his sword raised. Fox double pounce. First pounce. Naruto shouted and brought his sword down as Neji brought his kunai up to block it. But instead the sword merely grazes the kunai, and as Naruto landed he said, second pounce, and lunged the sword into Neji's stomach. Neji coughed out some blood at the impact and tried to strike Naruto, who instead dodged the attack and jumped backwards, pulling the sword out of Neji. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. The demon brat who wasn't even breaking a sweat was soundly defeating Neji, last rookie of the year and Hyuga prodigy. The only people who seemed to be happy were Sakura, since Naruto was her teammate, Hiruzen and Jiraiya, proud to see how far he's gone, Hinata, because her crush was okay, and Kurenai because Naruto was making Neji pay for what he did to Hinata. Where's your fate now, Neji Tem? Naruto asked with a grin on his face as he sheathed his sword. Neji growled at Naruto before he noticed the range that Naruto was in. Neji smirked and got into a stance and said, You're in my range. 8 trigrams. 64 palms. And struck Naruto quickly. 2 strikes. 4 strikes. 8 strikes. 16 strikes. 32 strikes. 64 strikes. Neji said as he finished off the last moves of his attack, only to see that Naruto wasn't phased at all. Instead, if Neji had been looking carefully, he would have seen that all of his strikes had gone through Naruto. How is this possible? Neji muttered as he looked at Naruto's face and flinched. Naruto was glaring at him fully with his Rinnegan activated. This caused Neji to jump back, but it didn't matter, because Naruto raised his hand and muttered, Bansho Tenanin. Then suddenly Neji was pulled towards Naruto by some invisible force, not even given time to react. Once he was close enough, Naruto slammed his other fist into Neji's stomach and said, This is for Hinata-chan. Genkatsu. He shouted as he twisted his fist clockwise like a key with chakra added into the attack. This caused a hole to appear on both sides of Neji's jacket and made him cough up even more blood. Once Naruto was done, he removed his fist and let Neji drop to the ground. Before Neji blacked out, he heard Naruto say, Fate does not decide for you, you decide for yourself. And with that he walked away. The audience was stunned silent at what they witnessed. Genma however soon regained his bearings and announced, "Winner Naruto Uzumaki." And with that the crowd roared in cheers. Kurenai smiled as she watched Naruto leave the arena while medics arrived to take Neji away. She wasn't really one who approved violence, but in this case she believed that Neji deserved everything that was coming to him after what he did to Hinata. Hopefully this will change the brat's view on life. And if not, then it was still good to watch. Speaking of Hinata, said girl was ecstasy that her crush won, though she was blushing too. When Kurenai had brought the flowers and said who it was from, she nearly fainted at the thought that Naruto made a blood vow to win this fight for her. She was so happy that Naruto won that she was clapping with a small smile on her face, something that Kurenai was happy for. She was finally showing her brave side. Even Kiba was rooting his rival for winning. "I'm surprised, Kiba, that you would be cheering for Naruto," Kurenai said to the Inuzuka. Kiba heard her and shrugged. "Hey, I would be pissed if he hadn't won, Kurenai-sensei. If he could beat me, there was no way Neji stood a chance." "Holy crap, Sakura. Where did Naruto learn to fight like that?" Ino asked as she stared at the retreating form of the blonde and, if she says so herself, attractive boy. "I honestly have no idea, but I'm just glad that he won," Sakura said while on the inside she was very shocked of how fast the match went and how strong Naruto became over the last month. She looked up at Lee and noticed a look of awe on his face. "What do you think, Lee-san, Guy-sensei?" Lee looked at Sakura and said, "That was an excellent display of power and youth that I have ever seen," he said with his trademark good guy pose. "Indeed, my student," Guy said as he watched Neji being taken away. Naruto showed true strength comes from hard work and hopefully has changed Neji's view on life. But that's not the only thing that pushed Naruto to win. "What do you mean, sensei?" Lee asked as Sakura and Ino also looked up at Guy. Guy smiled. It was clear that Naruto was fighting to avenge Hinata's defeat at Neji's hand. Such conviction to fight for another is one of the true ways to achieve great power along with hard work. The spandex-wearing ninja said. "Yosh," Lee said with fire in his eyes. "Then I too will train harder to protect those who are precious to me, and if I must, avenge them as well." "That's what I like to hear, my student," Guy replied. Cage booth. "I must say that was an impressive show of strength, Hokage Dono. I did not know you had such skilled shinobi," the Cage said in a calm tone, but inside he was seething. How the hell was that brat able to get so strong? And his chakra? They were off the roof. I must watch him carefully or he might become a threat to my plans. Hiruzen smirked. Yes, Naruto is indeed an extraordinary case and one of our most unpredictable shinobi, though I admit I was unprepared for the fact that he knew space-time ninjutsu. Then he looked at Jiraiya, who was rubbing his chin. "What do you think, Jiraiya-kun?" Jiraiya looked at his sensei and smirked. "I say the kid's a natural. Not prodigy natural, but the working hard till you drop kind of natural. I think I'll go and see him." And with that he shunshin away to meet with his godson, hoping to find out what he did during this past month. This left Hiruzen to his own thoughts towards a certain blonde-hair boy. "Minato, you would be so proud of your son right now." Competitors box. As Naruto walked up the stairs where the other competitors were, he noticed that they were all giving him looks, some of suspicion, some of curiosity and some of interest. However, Naruto noticed Gaara was giving him a sadistic smile, which no one else seemed to notice. "I didn't think this kid was much of a threat after seeing him fight in the preliminaries, but damn, I can't believe of all that power he's been hiding," Kankuro whispered to Temari. The Suna Kunoichi nodded in agreement and continued to look at Naruto. Shikamaru was thinking inside of his head. Damn, this is troublesome. I wouldn't have guessed that Naruto had that much power, but now that I see it I think it would be easier just to forfeit, though if I did that mom of mine would kill me, troublesome woman. Can Shikamaru Nara and Temari Sabaku come down to the arena for the next match? Genma shouted. Shikamaru sighed. Troublesome, he muttered and made his way down to the arena. Tamari too made her way down, but as she passed Naruto she gave him a wink. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this but said nothing. It basically goes the same way as it did in the canon. As Naruto watched the two fight one another he felt a presence from behind. Turning around Naruto could see a faint trace of chakra, meaning someone was hiding. Making sure the others weren't looking, Naruto headed towards the source, and once the others were out of hearing range he said, "I know you're there. You can come out now." Soon the person, who was none other than Jiraiya, appeared with a smirk on his face. "Not bad, Gaki. There are only a few who could detect me but never so easily." Naruto shrugged. "Well, I've been practicing on my sensing abilities, Jiraiya-san. Still, getting a compliment from someone like you is nice." Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. "So you know who I am?" Though seeing how the kid had the legendary Rinnegan, he was not surprised. Well, at first he was. After all, how many people have the dojutsu of the founder of ninjutsu? But Jiraiya managed to keep himself composed while conversing with the blonde. "When I was little I would always sneak into the old man's office and one time found a photo of him and three kids who were about my age. I asked him who they were and he told me they were his students, the Sanins of Konoha. That, and also I saw you multiply times peeking on the women in the hot springs where the owners would yell at you, screaming your name, and you were just standing besides the Hokage during my match." Naruto explained. The Toad Sage was impressed. He had heard that Naruto wasn't that very bright, but apparently he still had some smarts in him and now some good observation skills. "Well, Gaki, I'm impressed. I never expected you to be so observant. That, along with those skills you just showed, were a double surprise for me. By the way, where did you learn such an advanced space-time ninjutsu?" Naruto thought about this carefully. While he knew that Jiraiya was loyal to the village and to the Hokage, despite his bad habits, he really didn't know the man, and also he wasn't ready yet to reveal his dojutsu. For now he would just keep quiet about it. "Sorry, I can't tell you, except I did it through sweat and hard work," Naruto replied. "Oh, and why's that?" Jiraiya asked. "Simple really," Naruto said. "Though you may be one of the old man's students, and by your posture you don't seem like someone who would be against me, I honestly don't know you enough to reveal such secrets. After all, if I asked you some of your secrets, would you tell me?" Naruto asked. Now Jiraiya was really impressed. Not only was the kid strong and observant, but he was careful too. Very good traits for a shinobi to have. "Fair point, but tell me, did your sensei Kakashi help you in your training?" "No," Naruto said quickly, shocking the Sannin. "To be honest, he hasn't taught me or my other teammate Sakura anything except for chakra control and tree climbing. He's been spending most of his time teaching Sasuke. For example, after the preliminaries he left me with another instructor, Ebisu, to teach me about the basics while I had a seal on me that messed up my chakra. Heck, I don't know where they are right now. So everything I learned I did it on my own." To say Jiraiya was shocked was an understatement. Was this the same man, Kakashi Hatake, the student of the late Yondaime? He would have never guessed that Kakashi would show favoritism, even if it was the last Uchiha. He would have to notify the Hokage about this, especially if the man registered his team into the chunin exams unprepared. Well, that was pretty much it, Gaki. I should probably head back to the old man now. Naruto nodded. "Okay, but can you give him this for me?" Naruto asked as he pulled out something from his pocket. When he got it out, Jiraiya saw that it was a round golden medallion with the symbol of a whirlpool on it. "What is it?" Jiraiya asked curiously as he took it. "A sealing medium I design. I don't know why, but I have this strange feeling in the back of my head that something bad is going to happen. The old man is like a grandfather to me, so I'm just worried," Naruto explained with a serious look on his face. Jiraiya could tell that Naruto was deadly serious about this and his concern for the Hokage was legit. "Sure, Gaki, I'll be sure to give it to him. Anything I should know so I can pass it on to him." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, tell him not to use it unless it's a dire situation." That medallion only works once since it's a prototype. The Sannin nodded and Shunshin off. With that done, Naruto returned to where the other competitors were and saw that the match was already over. Temari was declared the winner due to the fact that Shikamaru said he was low on chakra, so he made a tactical surrender. Naruto, however, kept his eyes on Gaara, who was still staring at him. Hey Kurama, is it just me or does something seem wrong about that Suna guy's chakra? After the whole event last month, Naruto had tried to speak with the Kyuubi more in order for them to work better together. After all, if they were stuck together, they might as well work together. So far they managed to create a telepathic link between each other, allowing them communicates without raising suspicion. I too sense foul chakra similar to my own in the kid. My best guess is that he's the container of the Ikibi, Shukaku. He's one of the more unstable of my brethren, which would explain the kid's lack of sleep. Kurama replied back to Naruto. Lack of sleep, how can you tell? Naruto asked, confused as he heard Gaara's brother, Kankuro, forfeit his match against Shino for some reason. Well, I can tell that the kid hasn't slept in years due to the shadows under his eyes. Also, judging by the seal used to hold the Ikibi, must lack mental blockers, allowing the nut job more control of the kid's mind and body when he sleeps. That and Shukaku was always the type who liked to mess with his containers. Kurama explained. Naruto nodded before sensing two familiar chakra signatures. Looking back down at the arena, and in a swirl of leaves, Kakashi and Sasuke appeared, the latter wearing different attire now. Naruto suppressed a groan at the idiocy of these two, showing up late and then making a flashy appearance. Unknown to him, Hiruzen and Jiraiya, the former, after hearing the lack of training that the Cyclops gave his two other students, were also disappointed as well with Kakashi's lack of regard for being on time. Suddenly Naruto got an evil idea as he saw that Kakashi had his favorite orange book in his hand. As he pulled out a senbon from his leg pocket, he said to Kurama. Hey Kurama, watch this. Then Naruto, after adding fire chakra into the senbon, shot it towards the orange book so fast that no one even saw it hit the book and began slowly burning it to ashes. Kurama chuckled at this, and of course Kakashi was oblivious to this as he was talking to Genma. Sorry for being late, I hope Sasuke hasn't been disqualified. Kakashi said. Genma rolled his eyes. Be grateful that your match was last, otherwise the Hokage would have probably had Sasuke disqualified. At least your other student made it on time and put on a good show by beating the Hyuga kid. Good job training him, by the way. Kakashi nodded, though confused on what Genma meant. He would have asked when he suddenly felt his right hand getting hot. He looked down and his eyes widened in horror as he saw his precious book being slowly turned to ash. No, he shouted in an un-Kakashi-like manner and began to desperately trying to save his book in a comedic fashion. This earned sweat drops from everyone, while some of the older kunoichis who knew what the book was were laughing. After the interesting entertainment, a depressed Kakashi shunshin up to the stands where Sakura was. Genma shook his head with a smirk on his face before saying, Will Gaara Sabaku please come down to the arena? Gaara merely gave one last look at Naruto before doing a sand shunshin and appeared down in the arena. Crowd. As Kakashi appeared in front of his fellow Jonins and his only female student, he still had a depressed look on his face for the loss of his book. Asuma patted his back sympathetically. Don't worry Kakashi, I'm sure you can just get another one, just make sure that next time they don't get burned up. He said the last part with a snicker, followed by Kurenai and Anko. Kakashi ignored them and looked back down at the arena, where Sasuke and Gaara had already begun fighting. Breaking out of his depression, Kakashi asked, So how did Naruto do? It was amazing, Sakura said to her sensei. He completely decimated Neji. I've never seen anyone move so fast besides Lee-san. And the way that all of Neji's attacks just went through him like he wasn't even there was incredible. Kakashi raised his visible eyebrow. Went through him? What do you mean by that, Sakura? Kakashi asked. Kurenai answered for the pink-hair girl. Basically whenever Neji tried to land a hit on Naruto, his attack would just phase right through him. It wasn't genjutsu, that was for sure, so I think it might have been some kind of space-time ninjutsu. Kakashi's eye widened in shock just as Asuma asked, "Yeah, I have to admit I was impressed with the kid. What have you been teaching him that he managed to create such a jutsu?" Kakashi said nothing, which brought forth an uncomfortable silence amongst the gathered people there. Curious, Kurenai asked, "Kakashi, have you been training any of your students?" Kakashi didn't respond, and judging by Sakura's shameful look was a good enough answer to everyone that Kakashi hadn't taught them crap besides Sasuke. The Jonins shook their heads in disappointment at Kakashi's lack of teaching skills. Suddenly an Anbu appeared behind Kakashi and said to the Cyclops, "Hokage-sama requests your presence after this match, concerning one Naruto Uzumaki Kakashi-san." And with that he teleported, leaving a nervous Kakashi Hatake. Back with Sasuke's match, said boy was constantly trying to land a hit on Gaara, but the Chunin was almost impossible to hit with his sand moving all around him. In fact, now that Sasuke got a good look at him, Gaara didn't really seem all that interested in him and was instead looking up at the competitor's box at Naruto's direction. Does he see Naruto as a threat more than me? Sasuke thought angrily as he dodged a wave of sand only for another wave to come at him. In retaliation, Sasuke pulled out 3 kunai with explosive tags on them and threw them at the sand wave. The explosion caused the sand to be pushed backwards, giving Sasuke some space. Then Sasuke jumped onto the arena wall. Acting quickly, Sasuke began forming the necessary hand signs and gripped onto his left hand when lightning began to gather around it and make bird chirping noises. Guy who saw this looked at Kakashi in shock. "Kakashi, my rival, don't tell me that you taught Sasuke Chidori." Kakashi rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Hey, well, it turned out he had an affinity for lightning, so I thought I'd teach it to him." Guy shook his head in disappointment for the fact that Kakashi taught only one student and went as far as to give him his signature technique. "Well, let's hope it's worth it, though I think Naruto would probably kick his ass anyway," Asuma said. That got Kakashi's attention. "Oh, and why's that?" he asked curiously. Asuma smirked. "Well, you can tell that he's someone that doesn't go down without a fight, and the fact that he managed to create such a jutsu as that space-time technique proves that Naruto has reached a whole new level than Sasuke has," the Sarutobi said. Kakashi noticed how the other Jonins were agreeing with Asuma, making Kakashi feel kind of bad for not training Naruto and leaving him with Ebisu. With Sasuke, he charged forward towards Gaara with his Chidori crackling as he ran towards the Sun Nin. However, Gaara acted with great speed. First he formed a ball of sand to protect him from Sasuke's attack and increased the ball's mass and added more wind chakra to it, making it stronger. This proved to be a good idea because the moment that Sasuke's Chidori struck the ball of sand, it barely went through. What? It didn't work, Sasuke thought as he tried to figure out what happened. But before he could jump back, some sand grabbed his right leg and threw him backwards. "Pathetic," Gaara murmured as the sand ball dropped, revealing the red-head boy. "Show me your worth, Uchiha," Gaara said as he lifted Sasuke into the air with his sand. Then without warning, Gaara slammed Sasuke against the arena wall and then again onto the ground hard. Then he sent wave after wave of sand towards Sasuke, causing the Uchiha to move frantically to dodge the attacks. But unknown to him, a tentacle of sand had managed to grab his leg and slammed him on the ground again, this time making a crater from the impact. Everyone watched in horror as the Uchiha prodigy was being brutally beaten by the Chunin. Up in the cage booth, the cage was seething that his future vessel was having such a hard time with his opponent. And by the looks of it, Gaara wasn't even all that interested with Sasuke. Gaara had just slammed Sasuke against the wall again and prepared to finish him off when Genma and Kakashi just appeared in front of the Uchiha. "Enough. He can no longer fight. The match is over," Genma said. Gaara however ignored them and gathered all the sand he had and launched one final attack, intending to take out both Sasuke and the two Jonins, when he was suddenly struck right in the chest and crashed in the opposite of the wall, leaving a decent-sized crater on it. Everyone was shocked by the sudden attack but were even more shocked by the person who attacked the Chunin. Naruto? Kakashi asked. Said boy was standing before him with his right fist raised as he remained in his battle stance. Without looking back at his sensei, Naruto said, "Sorry Kakashi-sensei, but we have other problems." And just as he said that, a genjutsu began to be cast onto the entire arena, causing people to fall asleep, except for a few Jonins, Chunins and Genins who managed to dispel the genjutsu. Then the Kazekage and his guards lunged at the Hokage and Jiraiya while Oto nins and Suna nins appeared amongst the civilians and began attacking the Konoha nins. What the hell is this? Kiba asked as he and Hinata got down as shuriken and kunai flew over their heads. Kurenai had a kunai in her hand so she could deflect the projectiles heading towards her students. An invasion, we're being invaded by Oto and Suna, she said as Asuma smacked an Oto nin that was about to attack her to the side. We need to regroup with the others in the arena, Asuma said. What about the Hokage? Anko asked as she looked up at the cage booth and saw that the Kazekage was none other than her former master Orochimaru and was facing against Hiruzen. They were also surrounded by a purple barrier too that seemed impenetrable. Nothing we can do for him now. Our best option is to deal with these guys first. Besides, Jiraiya-sama is with the old man, so he should be fine. Asuma said, his voice filled with confidence in his father's abilities. They were soon joined by Guy, Lee, Sakura, Ino, Choji, and Tenten just as Kakashi appeared carrying Sasuke, who looked pretty beaten up. Then Shino and Shikamaru joined up with them, the latter mumbling, "Troublesome. Kakashi-sensei, is Sasuke-kun alright?" Sakura asked as she moved towards her sensei and teammate. Kakashi nodded as he got Sasuke to his feet. Yeah, but right now we have other problems. That Gaara kid went after Naruto, who's leading him away from the major population of the village. But the two other Suna nins also gave chase. Sasuke, the Uchiha, looked up. This is an A-rank mission. Take Tenten, Shikamaru, Kiba and Shino and help Naruto. The rest of you go and help evacuate the civilians. We'll cover your exit, now move. Hi, all the Genins shouted as Guy created a hole in the wall for the Genins to use and get out to follow Naruto. Kurenai used a genjutsu to conceal them so they wouldn't be spotted leaving. As Sasuke's team went towards the direction Naruto headed, the rest headed off towards the closest place where civilians were being attacked. Unknown to them, Kabuto had seen the whole thing from a hiding position. He knew that with the invasion happening, retrieving Sasuke now was their best chance. But during the Naras and the Suna Kunoichi's match, Orochimaru had relayed orders to Kabuto to capture Naruto, as he was interested in how the Kyuubi boy required his new powers. Turning towards a group of 12 Oto nins, he gave them a nod and soon all of them made haste after the team of Genins. With Naruto. Damn, bastard doesn't give up. Naruto thought as he dodged another air blast fired from the now transformed Gaara. The top half of Gaara's body was now covered in sand and his eyes had changed into a dark yellow. His head now resembled something of a mutated raccoon and his arms were now covered by large claws of sand. Finally, he had a large single tail swinging side to side from behind. Face me, Uzumaki. Mother demands your blood. Gaara shouted as he fired a barrage of sand. Naruto used his push ability and deflected the attack with ease. Then he landed on a tree branch and turned to face Gaara. They were far enough from endangering the village. Which means I can go all out. Naruto thought. Okay Gaara, you want a fight? I'll give you a fight. Naruto said as he formed some hand signs while Gaara lunged at him. Futon. Great breakthrough. And soon he launched a powerful blast of wind, which hit Gaara with full force, sending him flying. But Gaara managed to use his large sand claws to grab a tree and regain his balance. Gaara began to laugh manically. You amuse me, Uzumaki. I feel that your death will finally prove my existence. Gaara cried as he launched his own wind attack, a large bullet made of wind. Unable to use his space-time jutsu against a fast attack, Naruto jumped down from the branch just as the attack ripped apart the branch he was on. Naruto soon landed on the ground and looked up just as Gaara dived towards him. The Uzumaki boy decided to take this battle up close and charged towards the Chunin. Activating his Shinken, chakra began to flow through Naruto's blood. As he dodged a swing from Gaara's claw and Naruto landed a punch into the redhead's stomach. This caused the Chunin to cough out some air as he crashed into a tree. However, Gaara was soon getting back up and fired an air bullet at Naruto. However, Naruto raised his hands and said, Shinra Tensei. And an invisible force pushed back the attack, along with the trees nearby and Gaara, were all pushed back by the force. But Gaara managed to extend one of his sand hands and grab Naruto's leg and pull the blonde with him. Die! Gaara shouted as he tried to reach for Naruto's head with his other hand. But Naruto managed to pull out his katana and stabbed Gaara's sand hand, hopping to cut it off. He managed to cut off Gaara's sand hand, but before he could pull it out, Gaara tore it off, damaging the metal of the blade and threw it to the side. As Naruto jumped back to gain some distance from Gaara, he whined to himself. Oh man, and I had paid good money for that sword, he said. However, his thoughts were cut off when a large blast of wind struck him hard, sending him towards a tree. But Naruto managed to add some wind chakra to his feet and slow his movement, allowing him to land safely on the ground. But just as he was getting his focus, Naruto saw a large wave of sand coming at him, along with Gaara laughing manically in the background. Acting quickly, Naruto formed two clones, one on each side. Then he slammed his hands together. Shinra Tensei. Naruto yelled as an invisible barrier appeared around Naruto and his clones. When the sand wave struck the barrier, it was separated and began going around the blonde hair boy. Naruto managed to keep this up for a few minutes before he began to feel the strain of holding the barrier beginning to weaken. But then the clone on his right began forming some hand signs. Suton. Water encampment wall jutsu. And then he shot out a powerful stream of water, which began to form a large wall of water in front of them that collided with the sand. Not only was the water pushing the sand back, but it made the sand a lot heavier for Gaara to control. The other clone soon went underground and headed towards Gaara, who was still launching a barrage of sand towards Naruto and his other clone. With one clone already heading towards Gaara underground and another holding back the sand for a little longer, the real Naruto jumped into the air, forming some hand seal. Futon. Beast tearing gale palm jutsu. And then fired a powerful blast of wind in the form of a claw from his right hand towards Gaara, who was about to get out of the way when suddenly he felt something grab his legs. He looked down to see the third clone's hand out of the ground, their grip on his ankles, stopping he from moving since it was using chakra to hold Gaara in place. With that, the Suna Jinchuriki could only raise his hands in a useless defense as he was struck by the powerful gust of wind. Naruto landed on a patch of wet sand as he felt both of his clones dispel while he was looking at the dust gathering that his attack made. When he felt that he had won, the sand underneath him began to shake violently, and following it right after was a large puff of smoke. Then a foot of sand nearly crushed Naruto if he hadn't jumped out of the way in time. Naruto managed to land on a tree a few feet away, and what he saw shocked him. Standing before him, even taller than the trees, was a giant one-tailed tanuki. Aw shit, Naruto mumbled to himself when the Aikibi looked down at him. His eyes had no emotion in him, and even though they were a different color, the way they looked, it was like the Biju wasn't even conscious, or at least in control. Maybe Gaara is still in control, Naruto thought when he suddenly saw Gaara, who was on top of the sand beast's head, form a hand sign. Then his body slumped forward, hanging lifelessly, while at the same time the Aikibi's eyes suddenly came to life and then it shouted, Yahoo! I'm free and ready to kill. Well, this sucks, Naruto said as he watched the now awakened Biju letting out a mad laugh. Then Shukaku looked down and spotted Naruto standing on a branch. Crap. Ha. And speaking of killing, here's someone for me to kill right now. Shukaku laughed as he prepared to pound Naruto into the ground. Time to take this battle up a notch, Naruto thought as he clapped his hands together. Summoning jutsu. And he was consumed by a large puff of smoke. Shukaku still launched his fist downward when suddenly a large armored fist emerged from the smoke at top speed, hitting the one-tails right in the face, sending the demon back a few feet. When Shukaku landed, the impact caused the trees nearby to be torn off the ground and blown away. With the other Sand siblings in Naruto's backup team, the Genins all stumbled a little due to the impact from the Aikibi's crash. They were only a mile away from where Gaara and Naruto were fighting, but when Sasuke's team had caught up to them, Kankuro and Temari were forced to face them. But now their focus was on what had caused that small earthquake. This gave Temari and Kankuro some time to move back a couple of spaces away from the Konoha Nin as they turned towards the source of the earthquake along with the Konoha Nins. What they saw made the Konoha Genin's eyes widen while the Suna Nins turned pale. Shit, Gaara's already gone into full demon mode, Kankuro said as he watched the giant Biju get back up. But then their attention went back onto the large tower of smoke as it began to clear, making them even more shocked at what emerged from it. What the hell is that? Kiba stammered. Emerging from the smoke and around the same size as Shukaku was a being that was covered in heavy gray samurai armor with a horned samurai helmet over its head and a silver-blue demon mask over its face, showing only its yellow eyes. It wore gauntlets with spikes on them, same as on the knee pads, with a black cloak underneath the armor along with black gloves. It had a short fur cape on its back and a katana in its right hand. Look, on top of the creature, Shino commented. Everyone looked up and they were all shocked to see that the one on top of the giant warrior monster was none other than Naruto. The blonde-hair boy had a serious and confused look on his face as he looked at his summon. Did Naruto summon that? Tenten asked as she stared at the creature's weapon in awe. There was no reply. Everyone was just too shocked to respond as they gazed at the two large beings. However, not even Naruto knew what was going on. He had intended on summoning some kind of animal to fight Shukaku. Instead, he got a giant of some sort. Whoa, this is kind of cool, Naruto murmured before looking down at the giant. Hey big guy, you have a name or something? Naruto asked. In response, Naruto heard a voice inside of him, but he could tell it was from the giant. My name, young sage, is Mugen Sengoku. It is a pleasure to fight once again, side by side with you, even if you're not my original master. It took Naruto a few seconds to register what the giant meant. This guy used to fight with the original Raikudo Sennin. Naruto summarized in his head before focusing back on the topic at hand. Nice to meet you too, Mugen Sengoku. Mind lending me a hand? Before the giant could reply, Shukaku made his move. He slammed his hand against his belly, coughing out a powerful air bullet from his mouth straight towards Naruto. But the creature, Mugen Sengoku no Kyojin, waved its sword and sliced the bullet in two, avoiding taking any damage and charged towards the Biju. Oh, want to get up close and personal, Well, bring it the fuck on. Shukaku roared as he charged towards his opponent. When the two were finally close enough, Shukaku waved his large tail like a flail, hoping to knock the giant off his feet. But Mugen Sengoku smacked the tail to the side with one arm and then brought his sword across Shukaku's chest, leaving a large cut in the Biju's body. Kankuro and Temari gasped as they saw the Aikibi roar in pain and staggered back. Ah, you bastard, I'll get you, Shukaku began to say but was cut off when Mugen Sengoku delivered a powerful punch to the Aikibi's face and then kneed the sand demon in the stomach. This caused Shukaku to fall on its back while Naruto and Mugen Sengoku stood over it. Everyone was shocked at how easily Naruto and his summon were easily overpowering a Biju, creatures made up infinite amount of chakra. Temari and Kankuro were the ones who were the most surprised because they had never seen their brother take such a beating, and he was in his full Biju mode. Just how strong was Naruto and that giant? Naruto stared down at the fallen Biju, contemplating on his next move. He didn't want to kill Gaara, as he had a pretty good idea what was the cause of Gaara's bloodlust. But that would prove difficult because in order to stop Gaara, he would have to find him somewhere on Shukaku's body. Kurama had mentioned that if Gaara fell asleep then the Aikibi would have full control over his host, which meant that Naruto would have to wake the redhead up. His thoughts were broken when he saw a giant sand claw heading towards him. Acting quickly, Naruto had Mugen Sengoku grab the claw with his left hand, stopping the attack. But that gave Shukaku an opening to grab Mugen Sengoku's right wrist and then wrapped his large tail around the giant's neck. Shit. Naruto cursed out loud as he tried to free Mugen Sengoku. Haha. Got ya now, asshole. Now die. Shukaku laughed manically as he opened his mouth widely. Soon red and blue chakra began to gather around his mouth, forming a giant purple ball. Naruto's eyes widened. His Rinnegan could see the chakra compressing around that ball. If something like that hit him at close range, he would not survive. Acting quickly, Naruto commanded Mugen Sengoku to move its left hand towards the chakra ball, just as Shukaku ate it. Die. The Aikibi roared and released the bomb. But it was grabbed by the Kyojin's hand, holding it back from exploding. Everyone, Shukaku, the Suna Nin and Konoha Nin, watched in awe as Naruto's summon held the tailed beast bomb in place, though now and then its grip would weaken. Finally, with a loud roar from both Naruto and Mugen Sengoku, the Kyojin squeezed on the chakra bomb before completely crushing it, snuffing it from existence. Shukaku was gaping like a fish. He couldn't believe someone managed to compress a tailed beast bomb. He was so distracted by this that his grip on Mugen Sengoku's right wrist slackened, allowing the Kyojin to free itself and cut off the Aikibi's arm. Shukaku roared in pain as his arm was cut off. But he still managed to growl, "God damn it." But his voice was soon cut off when he felt a feeling of death surrounding him. When he looked back at his opponent, his jaw dropped. The giant appeared to be 10 times larger than the Biju and its yellow eyes appeared to be almost looking into Shukaku's soul. The Aikibi never felt such fear in his life as Mugen Sengoku slowly raised its sword. "What?" Shukaku murmured, though everyone managed to hear it. "What the hell are you?" The giant paused, waiting for Naruto to respond, curious of what it would be. He was not disappointed. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi of Konoha, member of the Uzumaki clan, Nadaime Raikudo Sennin and the next Hokage." The blonde shouted proudly. "And this is your wake-up call, Gaara." With that, Mugen Sengoku brought his sword down hard onto Shukaku, who exploded into sand. The observers watched in awe as the Biju gave out one last roar as the sand flew into the air and came back down like a hailstorm. Then, acting quickly, the giant lunged his other hand forward and grabbed an unconscious Gaara. "Okay, now bring him up here, big guy," Naruto said as he pulled out 2 pieces of paper with the word seal on them. "Good thing I looked up Fuinjutsu last month," Naruto thought to himself as the giant brought Gaara close to the blonde. A few seconds later, Naruto had put the seals onto Gaara's chest, suppressing Shukaku's chakra and influence so Gaara couldn't go on a rampage anymore and get a good sleep for once. "Naruto Dono," Mugen Sengoku said to Naruto through the boy's mind. "I still sense a malevolent power nearby. I shall remain here to aid you until that source has been evaporated." Naruto nodded. "Got it, big guy, just lead the way." As the giant began walking back towards the village, with Gaara in his hand, he passed by Gaara's siblings and Naruto's friends. Said blonde spotted them from his spot and yelled, "Hey Tem, Mugen Sengoku and I are going to deal with something. So stop starring and grab those 2 Suna Nins, they're Gaara's siblings." With that, Naruto continued heading forward while ignoring the still shocked look on the others. With Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage did a flip backwards in order to avoid a powerful kick from the reincarnated Shodaime Hokage. Then he lunged his bow staff forward, striking Hashirama in the chest. But the dead Hokage merely brushed it aside and charged forward, the wound already regenerating. Currently Hiruzen and his student Jiraiya were facing against the traitor Orochimaru, and his two summons through Edo Tensei, Hashirama Senju, the Shodaime Hokage, and his brother Tobirama Senju, the Nadaime Hokage. Somehow Orochimaru managed to obtain the Kinjutsu of the second and was now using it to fight against his former sensei and teammate. Hiruzen was battling Hashirama while Jiraiya fought Tobirama, and now and then Orochimaru would pop in to join the fight. Still, if Jiraiya was not with him, then Hiruzen would have been in bigger trouble, fighting against two past Hokages and one cage-level shinobi. Now and then Hiruzen managed to get a glimpse of the battle outside the barrier that surrounded him. From what he could tell, his shinobi were holding out and giving the invaders trouble. He had a feeling that Kakashi and some of the veteran Jonins were coordinating the others within the arena, and there weren't many that could match copycat Kakashi. But the real problem is here. Hiruzen thought as he swung his staff again, forcing Hashirama to move back a few feet. If we can't find a way to deal with these two, then no one in Konoha will survive this invasion, especially if soon as Jinchuriki returns. Speaking of Jinchuriki, Hiruzen's thoughts went back to Naruto. Before Orochimaru had lunged at him, the Sandaime Hokage managed to catch a quick glimpse of the young Uzumaki leading the Suna Nin away from the major population of the village. Despite his recent developments, facing an unstable Jinchuriki would not be easy, and the Hokage silently prayed for his surrogate grandson. Wait. Didn't Naruto give something to Jiraiya that was for him? Reaching for his hip pouch, he could feel the medallion that Naruto had made. He didn't know, but he felt like the time to use it was now. Naruto-kun, Hiruzen thought as he began to pull it out. I put myself in your hands. But just as he pulled out the medallion, several tree roots appeared and began wrapping themselves around Hiruzen. This caused the Sandaime to not only drop his staff but the medallion as well. Shit. Hiruzen cursed as he was lifted into the air by the roots. He looked down and saw Hashirama already releasing his hands after forming the snake seal. Hiruzen, Emna, the Monkey King, shouted, changing into his true form. He was about to go aid his old friend before he felt something around his ankles. Enma looked down just as more tree roots ensnared him as well. Damn it, he got us, Enma said as he looked at Hashirama. Sensei, Enma-sama, Jiraiya shouted but was kicked hard in the chest by Tobirama, sending the toad sage flying backwards and then skidding across the roof. The Anbu outside the barrier could only watch helplessly as Orochimaru and his two summon approached the trapped Sandaime Hokage. The snake Sanin chuckled as he held the sword of Kusanagi in his hand. Looks like I finally caught you, sensei. Orochimaru said casually as he walked closer to deliver the final blow. Boom! A large explosion caught everyone's attention, stopping them from whatever they were doing. Everyone turned towards the source of the explosion and they all let out gasps, even the three Hokages and the two Sanin. Mugen Sengoku had finally reached the village and was now walking through the streets and over ninjas and civilians alike. Riding on top of his head was Naruto and an unconscious Gaara. Naruto looked down and couldn't help but laugh at the gaping faces of the onlookers. And he thought that nothing should surprise a shinobi. But his focus went back towards the arena where he saw the large purple barrier and a mini forest within it. Hey Mugen Sengoku, is that the place? Naruto asked while pointing at the barrier. Mugen Sengoku followed his finger and nodded. Indeed, that is the source of the evil. Come Naruto Dono, let us purge it. Hell yeah, time to kick some more ass. Naruto shouted as Mugen Sengoku walked towards the arena, completely oblivious to the vain attacks that Suna and Oto Nins were using. The only time he made any acknowledge of them was when he had to smack them out of his way. Thanks to his large size, Mugen Sengoku managed to reach the arena in record time with everyone looking up at him in awe and fear. WW, what the hell is that? Orochimaru shouted as the being was looking down at the occupants within the barrier. The snake Sannin had lost his usual cool because for the first time, after feeling the tremendous power radiating from the Kyojin, he felt a little bit of fear. Jiraiya and Hiruzen were merely too much in awe to speak or even move. But theirs, along with everyone else, widened their eyes as Mugen Sengoku raised his left hand above the barrier. Oh fuck. That shithead isn't going to do what I fucking think he's going to do, is he? Tayuya shouted just as Naruto yelled, "Now Mugen Sengoku." Upon command, Mugen Sengoku plunged his fist straight towards the barrier. With his tremendous size and power, the barrier shattered automatically as the fist made contact. The impact caused everyone to either jump out of the way or was sent flying backwards. Ironically, as he was sent flying in the same direction as his predecessors, Hiruzen managed to grab the medallion and point it at the Shodaime and Nadaime Hokages. The moment the medallion faced the two reincarnated Hokages, the swirl symbol opened up, revealing a black space inside. Then from the black space, a powerful gust of chakra was unleashed and struck the two deceased Hokages. The results were that the Senju brothers' souls left their reincarnated bodies, thus breaking the jutsu and reducing the bodies to ash and dust. Incredibly, Hiruzen thought as he landed. He looked at the medallion just as it began to close. It cancelled the technique just by pointing it towards the technique, truly a device that only an Uzumaki could create. His thoughts were cut off when he heard a familiar voice yell, "Damn you, Sarutobi!" Orochimaru yelled as he lunged towards his former sensei. Without his bow staff as well as being caught by surprise, Hiruzen made a desperate attempt to defend himself by raising his hands. However, that did not stop Orochimaru as he plunged his sword of Kusanagi into Hiruzen's chest, causing the elder Hokage to cough up blood. "Die!" Orochimaru yelled as he rammed Hiruzen into the ground. But doing so caused his right shoulder to touch the still open medallion. The results that the medallion began to suck in the snake Sannin's life force, something that said man felt automatically. What's happening? Orochimaru yelled as he tried to pull away from the medallion, which he was finally able to do so, but the cost was that his entire right arm, from the hand to the shoulder, turned a decaying purple and had gone limp. "No! No!" Orochimaru shouted in horror as he jumped away from a wounded Hiruzen, his sword in his left hand. However, his focus shifted when he felt a shadow on him. He looked up just in time to see Mugen Sengoku's fist slammed right into him, crushing almost all of the snake Sannin's bones as the man was sent flying miles away from Konoha. "Orochimaru-sama!" Sakin cried as he and the rest of the Sound Four fled the arena and out of Konoha to retrieve their master. "Hokage-sama! Sensei!" The team of Anbu and Jiraiya both landed next to a wounded Hiruzen who was breathing heavily. The wound from the legendary sword was deep and right through Hiruzen's chest. As the Anbu were tending to their Hokage, Jiraiya looked back at the village to see that Naruto and his summon had already gone to aid the rest of Konoha's forces in driving out the invaders. One thing is for certain, Jiraiya thought as he looked up at Naruto, his godson, with a look of pride on his face. Things will definitely be different from now on.